Cooper Canyon Camp. It's been a long time since the day I promised my mom that I could take her camping with backpacks lighter than my laptop. Backpacks so light and so well fitted that she would forget she's wearing it and just enjoy the trip. If you are unfamiliar with ultralight weight backpacking, you can read about it here. And I included a link. And I'm thinking...
So thoughtful.
Yes. Sorry. Moving on. I got a message on my phone on January 05, 2012 from my mother that she had just got the last of her gear in the mail and she wanted to go tomorrow. I told her that I would run home and grab my stuff. She would then pick me up in an hour and a half and tell me wearing a super thin shirt, lightweight and breezy boxer-sized shorts, and my toe shoes, "Oh, Jonathan, it's going to be cold." "Oh, okay," I said, running back in to grab a pair of underwear and a pair of socks. "I'll slip into these if it gets chilly," I said, pointing to the underwear. "And I'll slip into these when I go to sleep," I said, pointing to the socks. It's been so hot the past few days. I was looking forward to the cooler mountain air. I packed everything but food, and the next day I headed out with my stepdad, Jim, to gather supplies. My mother is doing the Whole30 challenge. That's 30 days of eating nothing but whole and processed foods, plus no grains or beans. Me, already eating pretty close to this due to how great I feel on the drug of good health in my favorite foods, am very happy for her. So we headed to Trader Joe's and picked up free-range eggs, grass-fed beef, bell peppers, avocados, carrots, broccoli, and Brussels sprouts. Such a fine feast.
Free-range eggs that fell 20 feet to
Stop.
their death.
I'm sure
No,
it's gonna get
I'm
to
going
that.
to get to that. I'm getting hungry writing this. But Jim was not satisfied. We had to make a stop off at another market so he could feed his crippling addiction to Power Bars and M&Ms. So we, with all our food, started heading out to some place none of us had ever been to before. Some place in the Angeles Mountains that my mother heard about from someone working at REI. "It's supposed to be really pretty," she said. By the time we got there, it was getting late into the afternoon, perhaps 3 p.m. So here we are, setting off. My mother liked my backpack so much she traded backpacks with me. And so we were off. We saw burnt trees, a lot of snow. As we trudged on, it got colder and colder, far colder than I, Valley Boy, had experienced in years. But I was moving and generating heat. Once we got to the campsite, my toes were starting to get cold. The ground felt like ice, perhaps because there was a lot of ice. But doing my best to tough it out, we started the actual camping bit. Here's Jim, starting to boil up a cup of water. And here's my mama, setting up camp 100 yards away. You're supposed to do this so animals don't associate humans so much with food. We picked a dip between the trees that seemed like it would keep us warmer. So we cooked, enjoyed a hearty meal, put all our foods in a bag and suspended it in the trees with twine, and at around 6:30 jumped into our sleeping bags in the icy dark. Turned off our headlights, and waited until sunrise. I learned a lot. I learned that cooking in a pot rather than a pan is much more efficient, and I've decided to start cooking all my meals as soups. They cook more evenly, faster, use less fuel, and you can even use your eating spoon for cooking that way. Up until now, I would always try to cook conventional foods such as burgers and even brought a tiny spatula with me. But I'll even be poaching my eggs from now on. I learned how fucking cold my toes can get. I'm going to try going up again wearing thin toe socks, but I'm not sure how much that will help. I'll likely need a special pair of trail shoes for super cold weather. I've heard a lot of great things about Avina 8, and if I want to go anywhere super cold, a pair of minimalist hiking shoes will likely be what I ended up getting. After all...
You'll have to buy yourself, sweetie, since I just spent over $200.
Yeah, after all, it was specifically my toes that were cold. And if I had closed-toed shoes, I don't think that would have been a problem. Especially if I had a pair of socks over, that really would have helped.
My feet were fine. It was only
Yeah.
my fingertips that were cold.
Yeah. And it's just, the way the toe shoes are set up, like my feet are spread apart and there's just little fabric, so it really was transferring too much. Anyways though, I learned how important it is to angle your feet downward even on a slight slope. Slowly over the night we all rolled down off our sleeping pads. It was so freezing cold, and I was taking most of the light but chilling wind for our group, yet we all made it through the night on our sleeping bags. I learned how important it was to plan your trip not only on the weather but the moon. The moon was almost entirely full, illuminating our sky and preventing us from seeing the stars. Sure, we could have hiked all night in that light, but with the cold, we weren't about to. Anything you guys want to add? That you learned that I missed out on?
That I need to get in better shape. That hike out was killing me.
I guess there are a few other things, but mostly it was just gear that we're going to pack instead. And stuff like that.
I want my own backpack, so I'll have my own fork and knife and spoon, and I'll know exactly where it is, and I can get it instantly.
Yeah, it'll be much easier.
Fill his backpack with M&Ms and granola.
And rocks.
And if he wants to fill his backpack with M&Ms and granola and liquids, strange liquids, then he'll have to do that himself.
Okay, great. It was dead quiet that night. We heard not a single sound other than the wind as we laid snuggled next to each other in the wind. My mother told me that if there's anything I wanted to talk to her about at the time, it was dead quiet that night. We heard not a single sound other than the wind as we laid snuggled next to each other. My mother told me that if there's anything I wanted to talk to her about, now was the time. It was too cold for her to read a book, and we had all night to talk. But there wasn't anything I wanted to say. It was unusually quiet, choosing instead to take all this time to think about my life. I got up late in the night to take a piss. My shoes were ice cold, and I didn't want to have to take off the thin, warm socks I did have. So I tried stepping into my stepdad's size 11 boots. That's one size too small, and I ended up walking about with my feet pointed down and my heels on the edge.
Actually, didn't you say one of your feet is an 11?
It's not completely an 11. Neither of them fit. Anyways though, as I was saying, I ended up walking about with my feet pointed down and my heels on the edge. I felt like a stripper. Tiptoeing about in the moonlight, away from my family, I started to get really tense. I kept looking about me, expecting something to start charging at me from any angle, at any distance. As I started pissing, I looked down in dismay. Yeah, I'm still afraid of being alone in the woods, before quickly bringing it back up and scanning the horizon for enemies. I snuggled back in my sleeping bag, and I thought to myself that this is the greatest hurdle for me. The fear of being alone, truly alone, in nature. I still remember the last time I was hiking by myself. I ninja'd my way through the forest, walking on needles, quietly creeping while looking and listening for hidden foes. I felt that there must have been a rattlesnake or a scorpion lurking in wait for me at any moment. But in the morning, I yelped as I slid my bare toes into my ice-cold shoes, which, due to our rolling, was no longer underneath my legs. We went to check out the food to find that the twine had snapped overnight, dropping everything about 10 feet. We'll bring rope next time, but man, everything was covered in eggs. We cleaned most of it off and packed everything back up in our last garbage bag, and, on my toes' insistence, headed home. I asked for the car keys because I knew I would get there first, and charged up the mountain, feeling better and better as my body generated heat. For 35 minutes I was at the top and in the car, already so warm that I was back in shorts and a t-shirt. After 15 minutes, I was back at the top and in the car, already so warm that I was back in shorts and a t-shirt. After 15 minutes my stepdad arrived. We waited another 15 minutes and my mama still wasn't there. Jim wanted to go down to look for her. I handed him a comic book illustrating the adventures of Smokey the Bear, and I picked up at the ranger station. I told him to read it as I would go instead. I bounded down the mountain, looking for her and cupping my hands to shout like a boy who had lost his dog. "Mama! Oh, Mama! After I traveled down a few turns of the mountain, I found her, shuffling her feet and looking exhausted. I took her light pack off of her, placed it on my back, and bounded up some of the slope. I then waited as she slowly walked up. Actually, the pack wasn't slowing me down. I don't feel any better. Now my back is cold and I need a jacket, she said. So I gave her a jacket and thought about what to do. Well, I can't carry you up, I said. Then I realized what I had to do. I gently bent down behind her and I put my hands on her back and started pushing her up the mountain. Now all she had to do was keep her legs moving. We got to a brisk pace doing this and eventually I had her all the way at the top. Our trip was over and we were ready to return home.